The police cruisers' red and blue lights painted my driveway in flashing colors as I watched Trudy Voss's teenage son waddle toward the street, struggling under the weight of my Tenon Dobsonian telescope like he'd just stolen a cannon. The tube was nearly as tall as he was, and his shoelaces were dragging on the pavement with each awkward step. Behind him, his mother appeared in a silk bathrobe, her hair in curlers, her voice cutting through the night air as she declared to the officers, "He's only borrowing it. This man hoards starglow. It's greedy to keep space to yourself." Above us, Saturn hung in the eastern sky, its rings perfectly positioned for viewing, and I couldn't help but think the universe was enjoying the show. One officer looked up at the planet, then back at Trudy, his expression suggesting he'd seen everything now. "My name is Marcus Heller, and I'm what you'd call a quiet homeowner in Maple Crest, a neighborhood tucked into sleepy Pinneford Township. I work from home as a software consultant, drink mint tea by the gallon, and on clear nights, I set up my telescope from the cul-de-sac's only dark corner to observe the cosmos in peace. I'm not bothering anyone, just trying to catch glimpses of Jupiter's moons or the Andromeda Galaxy." Across the street lives Trudy Voss, president of our HOA, whose voice sounds like a leaf blower firing up at 6 o'clock in the morning. She collects violation, finds the way some people collect refrigerator magnets, and she absolutely despises that I keep my porch light off for what I call astronomically considerate reasons. To her, a dark porch means I'm hiding something. Trudy's campaign against me started small, but escalated fast. First came the citations for unapproved nocturnal equipment and unsanctioned lunar gatherings, which was really just me, a thermos of tea, and Jupiter. She claimed my telescope violated the aesthetic standards outlined in Section 12, Subsection 4 of the HOA bylaws, which didn't actually exist. Then she posted a Facebook rant about how my stargazing was causing astral pollution that would lower property values. She wrote that the presence of telescopes attracted undesirable elements and created an atmosphere of scientific elitism. Flyers appeared on mailboxes reading "No Sidewalk Science" with a cartoon of an angry telescope. She started inspecting my backyard, claiming she was looking for a lost cat named Sir Whiskerton, who I'm fairly certain doesn't exist. I'd find her peering over my fence at odd hours, taking photos with her phone. She accused me of harboring meteors, which, honestly, if I could manage that, I absolutely would. When I installed a privacy screen to block the blinding floodlight, she'd aimed directly at my yard. She called it a shadow barrier and threatened more fines. She claimed it violated the open site provisions, another rule she'd apparently invented that morning. Then her son Aiden started showing up with questions. He was 17, all elbows and entitlement, and he'd casually ask about where I stored the telescope and whether the base separated easily. He wanted to know if it was heavy, how the locks worked, what time I usually went to bed. I told him no, it didn't come apart easily, and that the whole thing weighed nearly 60 pounds. He just said cool and walked away, but something in his tone made my instincts prickle. A week later, my garage security camera caught him at 2 o'clock in the morning testing my door lock with a screwdriver while Trudy's Prius sat at the curb with its engine running, headlights on, looking every bit like a getaway car. I watched the footage 3 times, my jaw dropping further with each replay. That night, everything came to a head. Aiden managed to slip into my garage through a window he jimmied open, unbolt the telescope tube from its mount, and start staggering away with it. I hit the garage door opener from inside, and the sudden noise and grinding of the motor sent him into a panic. I shouted. He bolted toward the driveway with the telescope still in his arms, and I immediately called 911. The dispatcher asked if I was in danger, and I said no, but my telescope definitely was. Before I even hung up, Trudy came sprinting over in slippers, breathless and wild-eyed, her robe flapping behind her like a cape. When the officers arrived, she launched into an explanation that left them visibly confused. She announced that the telescope actually belonged to the HOA because common stargazing was a community amenity, and I was refusing to share with my neighbors. According to her, I was monopolizing celestial access. She produced a resolution she'd apparently printed that morning, signed only by herself, declaring that astronomical equipment in Maple Crest was subject to HOA oversight and could be requisitioned for community use. When one of the officers, a patient man with graying temples, asked if she'd authorized her son to enter my garage, Trudy didn't miss a beat. She said that garages adjacent to cul-de-sacs were technically semi-public spaces at night. Something about easement rights and community welfare. The officer just blinked at her, his pen hovering over his notepad. His partner coughed to hide a laugh. We pulled up my security footage on my phone, and there was the whole thing crystal clear, including her Prius sitting there with its headlights illuminating the scene like a confession. You could even see Trudy in the driver's seat, checking her watch. Trudy doubled down, insisting that Aiden was liberating the night sky from a monopolist, that I was engaging in astral hoarding. The officer calmly asked me for proof of ownership. I handed over my warranty card with a serial number, my receipt from the astronomy shop, and photos of me assembling it 2 years ago. Trudy triumphantly produced a glittery binder full of what she called HOA vision boards, which included magazine cutouts of telescopes and a crayon drawing labeled Community Space Initiative. While the officers were processing this absolute circus, Officer Devlin radioed dispatch to verify something that had been nagging at him. Turns out Trudy had called ahead 30 minutes before her son's theft attempt to report. Me, as a greedy man, brandishing a tripod as a weapon, threatening neighbors who wanted to observe the stars. That was a false police report, which was a neat little crime all on its own. The officer's expression went from amused to serious in about 2 seconds. Meanwhile, my phone started buzzing. The local astronomy club's group chat was blowing up with screenshots. Aiden had tried to sell a lightly used Dobsonian telescope in their online marketplace about an hour earlier, listing it for $800 with a description barely used. Owner doesn't deserve it. Officer Devlin's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline when I showed him. Then another vehicle pulled up, and this one belonged to Pinneford Code Enforcement. I'd emailed them weeks ago about Trudy's stadium bright floodlight that she'd aimed at my property 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She'd installed it on an unpermitted pole, claiming it was for security purposes, but it was angled directly at my telescope viewing spot. They'd brought a light meter and a citation pad. Surprise, surprise. She was blasting 4 times the legal limit for residential lighting, and she'd never filed for the permit required for the 1-2 T-pole she'd installed specifically to, in her words, from a recorded HOA meeting, deter Marcus's activities. Glenn, the HOA vice president, showed up in pajama pants and a sweatshirt, looking like he'd just tasted freedom for the first time in years. He quietly handed Officer Devlin a printed email thread that showed Trudy had directed the HOA security fund to pay for her son's new gaming setup, claiming it was a security monitoring system. The emails also revealed she'd budgeted for a community telescope acquisition, which, according to her notes, meant buying my telescope after it was properly acquired. Glenn had been sitting on this information, afraid to act, but tonight had given him courage. He told the officer that Trudy had been running the HOA like a personal thief for 3 years, and everyone was terrified of her. The emergency HOA meeting that Trudy had called to address what she termed astronomical greed was packed, with nearly 40 residents. Officer Devlin played my garage security footage on the clubhouse television for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room. Glenn read the misused funds email aloud, his voice steady and clear, finally unburdened. Code enforcement announced their citation for illegal lighting and unpermitted construction. The astronomy club members, all 5 of them wearing matching star jackets, wheeled in my Dobsonian telescope like it was a trophy and parked it beside the podium. Someone started clapping. Then everyone joined in. Trudy shrieked that this was character assassination by constellation, that I'd orchestrated this witch hunt because I couldn't stand her leadership. Officer Devlin calmly began listing the charges. Criminal trespass for Aiden, attempted theft of property valued over $500, conspiracy to commit theft, filing a false police report for Trudy, and HOA fund misappropriation for good measure. The room erupted in whispers and angry mutters. Glenn immediately proposed a recall vote for Trudy's position as president. Paper ballots were distributed and collected within 10 minutes. The final count was 27-1 in favor of removal. Aiden raised his hand to vote for his mother. Officer Devlin gently lowered it for him, reminding him that he wasn't a homeowner and couldn't vote. As Trudy was being escorted out of the clubhouse, a kid from the neighborhood, maybe 10 years old, asked if space jail was different from regular jail. I couldn't help myself. I said fewer Karens, and the room burst into laughter. Even one of the officers smiled. Aiden was placed into a diversion program that required a formal written apology, full restitution for damages to my garage lock and window, and 100 hours of community service volunteering with the astronomy club, where he'd learned that sharing a telescope means asking permission first, and definitely not bringing a screwdriver. Trudy pleaded down to lesser charges, but still got hit hard. She faced over $15,000 in fines between the criminal charges, the code enforcement violations, and the mandatory removal and remediation of her illegal floodlight installation. She was permanently barred from holding any HOA leadership position for 5 years and ordered to complete a mandatory civics and boundaries course at the county administration building. The HOA also filed a civil suit to recover the misappropriated funds, adding another $8,000 to her bill. When the judge read the sentence, Trudy stood there in her now rumpled department store robe, her curlers askew, her face turning the same shade of red as the police lights that had started this whole mess. She opened her mouth to protest, to declare this was all a conspiracy. But for once, absolutely no sound came out. Her hands trembled as she gripped the defendant's table, and I swear I saw a tear roll down her cheek. The gavel came down with a final crack, and just like that, the Queen of Maple or Crest had fallen.